This is actually turning out pretty fine. I think I may try to cut the rest of it much like this. Now this piece I'm doing here at the moment is going to produce some really small pieces, but it's only the last little tidbit of the cabbage, so I'm not too worried about it. So actually a few comments. I'm going to start into the next quarter there, even though I said I wouldn't, because there's some comments on sauerkraut that I want to make for you. Sauerkraut, there's a bacterium that lives naturally on cabbage and on cucumbers as well, and that bacterium is, let me just see what I've got here. How am I going to do this? I'm trying to figure out how I had that last cut. What cut of this? I know. I do this. The bacterium lives naturally on the cabbage. This isn't what I wanted. Lives naturally on the cabbage, and with the addition of salt, the bacterium begins to thrive in a saline environment, and that's why the exact amount of salt you add is fairly important, because you want to create ideal conditions for that bacterium and his billions of buddies, obviously. And so you put the right amount of salt in, and it'll start to grow and grow and grow. Well, what that thing does is eat the carbohydrates in the cabbage or the cucumber, as the case may be, and it basically produces a type of acid as its byproduct, so it poops out acid. And it's a type of vinegar. It's not the same type of vinegar as regular table vinegar, which is produced with a different bacterium, but it's essentially the same type of thing that's being produced. And basically the vinegar lowers the pH of the whole thing, and that prevents it from rotting completely. The low pH prevents it from rotting and preserves it. You can have, I've had actually the best sauerkraut I made was a batch I made about 4 years ago, and I accidentally kind of lost the bucket in my basement. It was closed, and I sort of lost the bucket in my basement for about 13 months, and then I rediscovered it, and I said, oh crap, that was that sauerkraut. And I was ready to throw it all out, and I reached in, and it smelled so good, and it was, I tasted it, and it was just the most rockin' sauerkraut I have ever made. So I bottled it up. I still have some of it down there, actually. I'll be serving some of it tomorrow at the party. And I've never replicated it since, but I may try this time, actually, to do a really long ferment like that. So that's all the story I've got on bacterium. And oh, one more final comment. Red cabbage doesn't work. Red cabbage has a natural form. The red is from a natural form of iodine, and iodine is an antibacterial agent, as you may know, so it prevents that bacterium from growing. We tried it one year. I was showing a buddy how to make it, and he tried red cabbage, 1 bucket, and all it did was rot and get really stinky and nasty. So it didn't work at all. Now, I have since talked to a guy who said he uses red cabbage, but only about a quarter. He put 3/4 regular cabbage in his kraut and about a quarter red cabbage, and he said it works fine. So obviously, in a smaller concentration, the iodine is not strong enough to overpower the bacterium. So, but I haven't tried that myself. That's only hearsay. In any case, I'm going to let you go at this point. I've said everything I got to say. We're going to cut up the rest of that cabbage, put it in the bucket, and then we're going to weigh it and show you what that looks like. So there we are. We're done. That took roughly a half an hour for that 10-pound cabbage. That's a 19-liter or 5 US gallon bucket, and it looks like it's about half full. We're going to weigh that in just a moment here. So I'll send you back up to the top of the stove. Not really the most convenient place to be weighing a bucket full of cabbage, but there you have it. I'm suspecting it will be amazingly close to 10 pounds. 9 pounds. 9 pounds right on. So that would be, I got to double check. I meant to double check the amount of salt before I did this clip actually. I will turn it off and go double check. Get right back to it. So I couldn't find that reference, but I did find a reference that said a quarter cup per roughly 5 liters or 5 US gallon of cabbage, the way I have it just sitting in there like that. But I'm fairly confident with that other reference, so, and they both end up being the same in this case, so I'm doubly confident about it. But it's better to go by pounds than by volume is what I'm trying to say. Pounds of cabbage. So that's slightly less than the 5 pounds that would be required for a full half a cup of salt, but I think that's fine. I'm not going to bother. Actually, I will. That's not quite a full half cup. Now, normally what you do, I'm just going to talk about this for a sec. Normally what you do, by my normal method that I learned from my wife's grandfather, rest his soul, the way he does it is mix the salt in here. He sprinkles a bit on each layer, which I should have done all along, but I'm going to show you how to mix it by hand anyway, so it doesn't matter in this case. Mix in the appropriate amount of salt, and then you stomp it. And this is a piece of apple wood that I cut last year at the party, actually, with a chainsaw. You can see I had meant to get an oak staff mounted onto it since then. Get that cut off. We used it as a hand pounder. You wrap a cloth around it and it works really well as a hand stomper. But anyway, normally you have an apple handle. I have an oak handle I'm going to put on it. And then after it's all salted, you take your stomper, it's easier with the oak handle, and you just stomp, stomp, stomp to bring up the pickle, you call it, which means get enough of the juice out of the cabbage so that the cabbage sinks under and it's got just a slight amount of juice on top of the whole mass. But I think I tried this last year and it worked really reasonably well, but I didn't take notes. So basically what the new method is you mix in the salt the same way, which I'm going to do now. It's easier if you mix it in as you're going along, but I'm going to show you how to hand mix too. Never hand mix a full bucket, but a half full bucket is easy to hand mix. Break up all the chunks that you can and mix it all in, and then the same way you do for if you've ever made bread and butter pickles or a whole lot of other preserved pickles, you have to leave things like onions and cucumbers and so forth soak overnight in the salt, and then you pour out the extra water from it. It draws the water out of the fruit or the vegetable. Well, that will work with cabbage too. And hand mixing, I'm just doing like this. That will work with cabbage too, so in theory it'll soften the cabbage some overnight just on its own by the nature of that's what the salt does. So you can just leave it overnight, cover it, which I will in a moment here when I'm done mixing. Leave it overnight and stomp it tomorrow, and it'll be way easier to do. And you may actually, in some cases, I've read reports, I haven't been able to reproduce it myself yet, the whole thing will be submersible in the span of 24 hours anyway. Now the middle of the bottom will often get missed when you're hand mixing this. So there, I'm getting right in, and this is incidentally how you make coleslaw too, except you mix other stuff in there. There we go. So that's all well mixed, and I'm just going to pack it in, hand pack it, before I leave it overnight. No need to stomp it or anything. I forgot to mention too at the beginning, I cleaned the whole bucket out. I washed it out with a sponge, gave it a light scrub with a sponge and regular dish soap. So that's good. That's packed in there tight enough. Just going to find the lid for that, and here's a lid here that I can use, and it's clean enough underneath that I'll just put that on top. I'll just sit it on top. There's no need to snap it down tightly, and I'm just going to leave that there for, it'll be about 22 hours I guess by the time I open it for the pickle party, or by the time we're ready to do salting and stuff, it'll probably be about 24 hours. It's 3:45 in the afternoon right now on Saturday. We'll see what it is tomorrow when we look at this.